My name is Kelly.
And my name is Will.
We are two Florida attorneys.
Who love our 5 dogs.
And 2 cats.
And love listening to true crime.
Mainly me.
So I hope you enjoy our show as we delve into all things spooky.
This is For Crime's Sake.
So, we have Winston with us today. He is our little baby Chug, the youngest of the 5 dogs, and my precious little boy, who I absolutely love.
So Winston is a Chug, and for all of you who don't know what that is, a Chug is a Chihuahua Pug mix, and we adopted Winston about 3 years ago now.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, he is atypically cute, even for a Chug. Chugs are funny, but this Chug is beautiful.
And we are definitely not biased or anything.
No, not at all.
But we have posted a picture of Winston, also known as the Chug Baby, to our Instagram, Facebook, and our website at forcrimesake.com.
So, Kelly, what's on the docket this upcoming week?
Well, actually, we should discuss how we have mastered
how we have
pickleball.
Dived in headfirst to the exciting world of pickleball.
Oh, gosh.
It's great, you guys. I don't know. So, Kelly and I have just discovered this. Literally, we've started today. But it's like the fastest growing sport in America the last couple of years. This year, Tom Brady, Kevin Durant, LeBron James are all investing in pro pickleball teams. It's kind of like baby tennis combined with ping pong. It's super fun.
It was a really good time. I am not very coordinated or particularly athletic in any way, but it was a really good time. And
and you know what? You're not either of those things, but you actually did really well. I was genuinely surprised. No, I was honestly surprised. You did better than I thought you would do. I'm pretty excited. We're going to become pro pickleballers.
Oh, gosh.
So get ready for the day that you know us not only as your brilliant friends who are podcasters, but also pro pickleballers.
Yeah.
It's great.
So today we are discussing the suspicious death of Hugues de la Plaza. Sources for this week are newsbreak.com, sfgate.com, newyorktimes.com, SF Weekly, and cbsnews.com. Trigger warning for today's episode, suicide is discussed today. So if that makes anyone uncomfortable, today it just might not be the episode for you.
Yep, sit this one out.
So today's case takes place in the Hayes Valley, which is a trendy neighborhood in San Francisco, California. There are restored Victorian buildings and new condos, as well as an abundance of restaurants and little boutiques if you're in the mood to do some shopping. And get this, it is just a few blocks from the Painted Ladies in Alamo Square.
Which is actually really cool. And if you're like me and didn't know what that was when you first heard that, it's in Full House, in the intro of the original at least. I assume maybe in the Netflix reboot too. But in the original, those houses in San Francisco, those row houses. Yeah, really cool, really iconic American houses. So a cool area.
At the time of this story, Hayes Valley was right by the Tenderloin neighborhood, which had the highest crime rate in the city. So the Tenderloin neighborhood was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city at this point.
So it went from like really nice with the Painted Ladies to really bad real fast.
Yes. So June 1st, 2007 was like any normal night for Hugues de la Plaza. Hugues was a 36-year-old sound engineer with dual U.S. and France citizenship. He had just gotten a new position at Leapfrog, which is a company that develops and markets technology-based learning products for children. So he went out that night and had a fun celebration with his friends, drinking and dancing at a club called the Underground SF.
And I just want to jump in and say, I mean, Yeah, I'd be celebrating too. Leapfrog's like a really big company.
Yeah.
As a sound engineer, like this must have been a pretty big accomplishment for him.
No, absolutely. So he was having a good
Really cool.
time. So Hugh was out celebrating into the early morning hours, and one of his friends who he was out with that night, Neil Zarama, said the two had plans for that afternoon to go out on a motorcycle ride. Hugh had gone on a date that night prior to going out with his friends, and Zarama recalled how Hugh told him that the date didn't go too well and that they were just going to be really good friends.
Yeah, well, good for them.
Yes.
Maybe a bummer, maybe not. We'll never know.
We'll never know. We move on.
We move on.
He was heading out to go home. He was joking that he was going to look for a woman to sleep with, which is pretty optimistic considering the bar was only about a 10-minute walk to his apartment. So he was really hopeful for those 10 minutes there. But
yeah, I wonder how many opportunities he would run into.
A neighbor's security camera caught him arriving home steps away from his apartment, and he was alone at that point.
So it's not just, I want to ask about that because you made a distinction. The whatever caught him, the neighbor's security camera couldn't actually see like his door, but could see close enough that he was walking
and he
up
was
to
alone.
it.
Yeah, and he was alone at that point.
Okay.
And Hugues lived in a triplex, so it basically 3 doors in a row. And I posted a picture of this to our Facebook and website so you guys can check it out. A neighbor even heard him close the door to his place. So it's pretty, tight units,
So we can feel probably reasonably confident that he arrived home alone around the time that this footage suggests.
That's what it seems like.
Okay.
It looks like once he got home, he talked to a friend on the phone and went on the internet. He was wanting to purchase a house in Argentina, so he was looking at stuff related to that. And I think he went on some dating sites. I was kind of curious about like what that meant in particular about the dating websites, but I didn't see anything like really going into too much detail. So
we don't know if that means he was like making an eHarmony profile or swiping through Tinder real quick.
Probably prior to that.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
wow. This is prior to that.
I don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
He also made himself a snack, and his late night snack of choice, and this is so funny. I love it. It was rice and peas. And we definitely would have chosen something so much worse, like Taco Bell.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Wait, just kidding. Taco Bell.
Oh, yeah.
We love you.
Wait, no.
Sponsor us.
Be nice. We love Taco Bell. We're your friends.
But yeah, so he, made himself a little snack. And I'm actually going to post a picture of his unfinished late night snack to our Facebook and website. Warning, there is blood in the picture.
And that's a sad commentary on where this story is headed.
Absolutely. So around 2:38 a.m., neighbors reported hearing footsteps and doors slamming like about 3 separate times. The next morning, which would be June 2nd, a neighbor spotted blood on the doorknob of Hugues' front door and the front stoop and called law enforcement, which how horrific.
Not what you hope to see when you walk out and look at the neighbor's place.
No.
Especially a triplex. I mean, they're sharing walls.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good Lord.
So police arrive and they knock on the front door but get no answer. Then they go around to the back of the apartment, look in the kitchen, and see even more blood. And at this point, they enter the apartment by breaking down the door.
Okay.
The back door.
And the front door
was locked.
So there was presumably there was no forced entry, no broken locks already if the police had to break the locks to get in, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and the front door actually to that point was deadbolted.
Okay. So, I mean, it was pretty much locked up, so we would expect that whoever was responsible for this is still inside or something else.
Or had locked the door.
Yeah, or had the ability to lock the door on the way out.
And I'll get more into this in a little bit, there is a possible another theory.
Okay.
So there was blood everywhere, on the walls and even a trail leading to the kitchen. Hugues was found on the living room floor, and unfortunately he was deceased. Chris Moore was one of the paramedics on scene that day, and she has been quoted saying, "As soon as I hit the door, the smell was very distinctive. because blood smells like iron. It hit me like a wall, and there was so much of it. It was just unbelievable, the amount of blood. I have never seen anything like that, and I couldn't imagine what his last moments were like.
Wow. That's very violent.
Absolutely. And, obviously, this is her career, right? This is her job. This is, I'm sure she's used to seeing pretty unpleasant scenes frequently.
I would think paramedic is probably pretty hardened to the frightening things you might find at a crime scene or whatever scene. But wow.
So I think this is a testament to what the scene actually was like.
Pretty awful.
So Hugues had 3 stab wounds, one in his chest, one in his stomach, and one just below his neck. And all 3 were about 3 inches deep. But here's the wild part. So San Francisco Police Department takes all of this in, and they come up with a theory. But it's not maybe what you would expect. They believe Hugues committed suicide.
That's absurd.
Yeah, they believe that Hugues came home after a celebratory night out and then stabbed himself in the chest and neck and stomach.
Which makes what kind of sense?
It's wild. So on those nearby security cameras, no one was caught entering or leaving his apartment. And when police questioned his neighbors, a neighbor did state that they heard a thud coming from Hugues' apartment. But no one heard anything that sounded like an attack or a call for help. Some other interesting things about the scene: Hugues' watch was found under him, the TV was overturned, and there was a broken wine glass.
Okay. So far, I mean, first off, it seems outlandish to say
to
that
jump to suicide.
He stabbed himself not just once, but in 3 very different places with 3 pretty deep injuries. I mean, 3-inch wounds. That's not like a little slice or like even cut his wrist. That's like plunged a knife deep into himself.
And the scene seems like possibly a struggle took place. I mean, his watch is off, the TV is turned over, and there's a broken glass.
And I get that no one was caught entering or leaving the apartment, but there was neighbors said they heard commotion or
they at least heard a thud. They heard something.
Okay. So, anyway.
So Hugues' footprints were the only ones found at the scene. So in all this blood, there was only one set of footprints, and it seems to be that they were Hugues'. Hugues' cell phone was found on the coffee table in the living room, close to where his body was. And it didn't have any blood on it, nor had any calls to 911 been made from it.
So we would think that if this had been an attack, that he might have tried to reach for his phone or
if
call
he'd
for
been
help.
able to.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know what type of shock your body goes into after that type of wound. So So Hugues was still very close with his ex-girlfriend, Melissa Nix, and she's actually a journalist. They had dated for 4 years, and she has stated that she's actually the person who told Hugues' parents, Francois and Mireille de la Plaza, who lived in France, that Hugues had died. Hugues was their only child. And this is just a side note, but I've read the investigator's report, and he wrote that the French consulate notified Hugues' father of his death. So it's just a little discrepancy. Don't know what to make of it, but
something odd.
That's what I found. Yeah.
Okay.
So Melissa worries that she was the one that actually started police theorizing about suicide. When she first spoke with the police, she asked if there was any way that he had taken his own life.
Okay.
She thought possibly it was over their breakup and that he had taken it, pretty hard,
pretty badly.
Pretty badly, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that would be taking it hard.
So Melissa had told the police that Hugues was into Japanese culture and frequently watched samurai movies. And she had asked if this was possibly harakiri and whether Hugues was stabbed in his stomach. And I actually looked into what hara kari is, and I found out that it is ritual suicide by disembowelment with a sword.
And if you're wondering about that name, Harakari, and thinking Harikari or Harikari, which a lot of people say, and that's how a lot of us know that
Am
term.
I pronouncing it right?
No, you are pronouncing
okay.
it correctly. Most of the time we don't. I don't know why. It's just a westernized version of that, but it is the same thing you're thinking of where, a disgraced soldier would put a sword through his own stomach to kill himself.
And I guess, remember, Hugues was stabbed in his abdomen. But at this point, now that Melissa has all the facts, she does not believe that Hugues committed suicide.
Okay.
And she was actually, just to put this out there, Melissa Nix was in Virginia when he died. So she was not in the state at the time.
So we can pretty reasonably clear her as a suspect.
Yeah, that's what it seems. Although I know some people will disagree with that.
Well, sure. People will disagree about just about anything, but that's okay.
So, what about the knife? So several knives were found in the kitchen, but none of them had any blood on them. And one was found in the kitchen sink.
And that one had no blood on it?
There was no blood.
That is super weird.
Yes. So all the knives were cleaned off enough that there was no blood. Yeah. It wasn't like there was just a bloody knife in the sink.
So if one of those was the murder weapon,
it had been cleaned.
It had been cleaned. But the scene is covered in blood. It's one of the bloodiest scenes anyone has ever seen. Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy. Why would the knife be cleaned? Especially if it's a suicide.
Begs the question, if he was attacked, did someone take it with them?
Yeah, it's an odd thing.
So police theorized that Hugues had gone over to the kitchen sink to clean the knife, hence the trail leading to the kitchen.
Okay.
After he stabbed himself 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, that seems so weird.
Yeah, because it's not like any other parts of the crime scene, as you just said, were cleaned up. It's just the knife, which...
It just defies logic.
Yeah. So there was a notepad found on the coffee table, which had 2 quotes on it. The first one was, live as if you were to die tomorrow. And the second was, learn as if you were to live forever. And police, I guess it depends how you look at it. Police kind of took this almost as a
suicide note.
Yeah, it looks like to some degree.
Yeah, and I can understand in the context of assuming it's a suicide why they might say that. But
although it seems pretty inspirational, right?
Well,
to me, I mean.
And I mean, no matter what, if you remove the assumption that this is a suicide, suddenly, if we don't know when this was written or why this was written, I have all kinds of things written down in books and notebooks and journals and stuff that in the right context could look like any number of things. So
when the toxicology report came back, there were no drugs found in Hugues' system. So this obviously, I think, kind of, I think the theory might have been to begin with from police that, hey, maybe he did a lot of drugs that night with his friends, came back and then, stabbed himself 3 times.
This was some kind of drug-fueled mania.
Yes, but no drugs were found in his
Clearly
system.
That was not the case. Okay.
So let's talk more about Hugues' injuries. Other than the 3 stab wounds, he had other blunt force injuries. He had small abrasions on his lip and arm.
Okay. Interesting. Those could be signs of a struggle. Those could be things that might have just happened throughout his last moments, which it sounds like were pretty unpleasant, however they were caused.
So Dr. Venus Azar is the San Francisco medical examiner, and he obviously took all these facts in when he was doing Hugues' autopsy, and he ruled the cause of death to be undetermined.
Okay.
And here are some things that seem to have led to Dr. Azar's finding of undetermined. The blood he believed the blood evidence indicated that Hugues was walking around slowly bleeding. So Dr. Azarez explained that the blood stains were circular on the ground and very rounded. And the doctor believes that if he was running, they would have been a different shape, more elliptical with a tail on them.
Okay, so the blood spatter would suggest that he was pretty calm.
That's what Dr. Azar is saying. As I said previously, his cell phone was also found nearby. No calls to 911 had been made, and there wasn't any blood on it, which Dr. Azar believes indicated he hadn't tried to use it. His wallet was also at the scene and contained $80 in cash, and his keys were also there, untouched. So robbery doesn't seem to be a motive. The only blood, DNA, and hair found at the scene was Hugues.
So right there, we have a difficult problem for investigators. If we assume all of the evidence that we've discussed up to this moment is true, and we take all of that at face value, then what we know is that he arrived home alone around 2:38. Neighbors heard a sound, and then there was blood somehow on the front door and the front stoop, but the doors were locked, and there is only any evidence inside to suggest that he was there, literally nobody else.
And I think that is also unusual with how violent the scene was, because, you know, if you're stabbing someone, I think it is pretty unlikely that you're not going to somehow cut yourself while doing that or injure yourself in any way.
Some kind of touch DNA or something like that. So it's a difficult problem, because I see how the conclusion might have to be he's the only one there.
So Hugues' parents were very frustrated with the investigation into their son's death, and they hired their own private investigator. They filed a complaint with French authorities because Hugues was also a citizen of France, and they argued that their request should be granted due to the police not having enough resources and needing the assistance of the French government.
That worked out, ultimately, I guess, pretty nicely for the family, that they were able to tap the resources of an entire foreign nation.
Yes, and France did send their own forensic experts to San Francisco to re-examine the evidence.
Good for them.
So they investigated for 9 months and released a 2,000-page report. And they stated that they are certain Hugues' cause of death is homicide.
So we got to pump the brakes hard at that point, because up to now, as I just said, if we accept everything we know and have been told by experts as true prior to this, then I see how suicide might be the only logical conclusion. But here we have French authorities saying they are certain it's homicide. So they're obviously seeing something we are missing or don't know at this moment.
Well, and honestly, though, Dr. Azar's finding was not suicide. It was undetermined.
Right. Fair. And I guess I'm saying
no doctor has said suicide.
I'm just saying I can understand, based on all of that previous, I can understand reaching that conclusion, which at some point SFPD had done, whether they continued to maintain that belief or not. It sounds like they did, because they weren't investigating it as a homicide anymore.
Okay. But I think that the issue is they have right now the first Dr. Azar's he ruled the cause of death undetermined, and I understand that they didn't have a lot to go on, but it was not cause of death suicide. And now they have the French authorities looking into it, ruling homicide. I think that does, maybe they could take another look at it, instead of just saying, undetermined equals suicide, which is not true or fair.
Yeah, no, but for sure, that's it's a pretty wild thing to be certain it's homicide.
At the time, San Francisco had been dealing with a surge in homicides in recent years. So, with all of the chaos surrounding Hugues' case, the Los Angeles Police Department conducted their own review. And they believe suicide is the most likely scenario, but that due to the poor communication at the scene, a definite conclusion cannot be reached.
Okay. So now we have SFPD's medical examiner saying undetermined. We have the French authorities saying certainly homicide. Now we have the LAPD saying suicide.
That they believe it's the most likely, but they can't reach a definite conclusion. So
we're all over the map.
Yes. A second review by medical examiner Dr. Michael Farringe did make a clear determination, though. He ruled Hugues' cause of death as homicide.
Okay.
So reasons for this, he stated that the blood splatter on the exterior apartment wall, it looks to be from cast off from arm movements.
Okay. So, I mean, yeah, that's...
Because remember, there was a bunch of blood found on the outside part of his apartment. So if it's suicide, then the argument is he stabbed himself outside his own apartment and then went in and locked himself back in his apartment.
Stabbed himself 3 times outside of his apartment, flung a bunch of blood on the door.
And then walked in and bolted it.
Locked the door, and then went and cleaned up the knife and walked around in circles until he died. I mean, that's madness.
That's the thing. So Dr. Farringe believes that he had been stabbed on his porch, walked inside, and locked the door in order to get away from his attacker.
And I think that makes the most sense based on the evidence.
I think that makes the most sense, too. He's just trying to escape. He's locking himself in.
It's the only reason you'd have blood cast off on the exterior.
Outside. Yeah.
And maybe he didn't call 911 for any number of reasons, but okay.
Dr. Farringe believed that with how serious his neck wound was, Hugues would have died within a couple of minutes because it had severed major blood vessels and punctured his left lung. So his injuries were so extensive, he was unable to call for help.
Okay.
And that would explain
why the 911,
yep.
Why he never touched the phone. Okay.
Also noted was a faint mark on Hugues' hand, which Dr. Farringe believes is a defensive wound.
Well, and I think we had noted earlier there were some blunt force trauma and
to the lip
abrasions to the lips and arms, so that could be consistent with some sort of really limited defensive wound. Okay. Okay, so with all of that evidence noted, we have a wide range of professional opinions from law enforcement professionals across the board telling us from it's certainly homicide to almost certainly suicide, undetermined. So what theories are we left with?
So obviously the first theory is suicide.
Right. For me, it's pretty much a non-starter. Like, I get he liked Japanese movies or samurai movies. I really like fantasy stories and Game of Thrones, but I'm not going to try to set people on fire, take over kingdoms, Just because we like something doesn't mean we're going to act it out in real life. And this wasn't a ritualistic disemboweling with a sword. This was 3 separate deep stab wounds and evidence that suggests that he came from outside to inside during the course of bleeding.
And here's the thing, and this, I think the strongest evidence for the suicide was the lack of DNA, hair, any sort of other evidence from another person. But if he was attacked on his front stoop and the attacker never made their way into his apartment, then there wouldn't be any physical evidence of that.
Agreed.
And that would explain the lack of forensic evidence,
It's all of the things that make the suicide a viable theory, which is really just a lack of evidence of other people. is completely explained away if we assume the crime was committed just outside.
Yes.
And so because of that, suicide is a non-starter for me. I don't have any reason to believe that that's what happened here.
So if we discount the suicide theory, that obviously leaves us with homicide. And the first theory about that is a jealous lover. So at the time, Hugues was dating different women, and he wasn't being too cautious about who he went out with, according to the people that knew him and spent time with him. Hugues had dated women who were married or dating someone else. So the theory is possibly an angry boyfriend or husband attacked him.
That seems plausible. I mean, there's no real evidence to suggest that's what happened, but...
Nothing has been released to indicate that a particular person was,
having an issue with him or, like, sending him threats.
Not that we know of.
Right. Okay. But, so, I mean, that's a plausible explanation. There's no evidence of it, but it would be a plausible motive. Okay.
The next theory would be drug-related. So Hugues was an occasional drug user. So the theory is maybe he upset a drug dealer or someone connected to that. But if you remember, the toxicology reports came back negative. So it wasn't like Hugues had done drugs that night and something stemmed from that.
Well, and I mean, he was celebrating this great job. I mean, if he was a regular drug user, you would think he was probably using drugs when he was celebrating, but he wasn't using drugs. The tox screen came back negative, so that feels like a stretch.
I guess the only thing would be is if he had contacted someone to possibly deliver, to get drugs. They arrive, something happens, he's attacked, and that. But yeah.
Yeah, but if you give me that or the jealous lover, he's walking home. He's telling his friend he wants to find somebody to hook up with that night, not somebody to buy drugs from that night. So if anybody showed up at his apartment and he had a scrap with them, I'm going with someone related to a lover more than drugs because there's no evidence of the latter.
And I would think also if you're contacting someone to get drugs, there would be evidence of that on his phone.
And
I mean, we don't know, but that would be my thought.
Yeah. Okay.
So another theory that's been mentioned is that Melissa Nix, his ex-girlfriend, killed Hugues. But as I already said, she was in Virginia at the time, and she has stated that Hugues was the love of her life.
Okay, so this one feels pretty unlikely. I mean, she was out of the state. She's not in the area. She has been involved in the investigation. She's presumably cooperated with law enforcement. And, I mean, there's no evidence to suggest. It's not like he was walking home telling his friend, oh, yeah, I'm going to call Melissa.
Or I'm going to meet up with Melissa. I feel like this is a huge stretch. I don't think there's anything to indicate that. And I think this is the weakest.
I think so too. So I don't know about you, but right now I'm gonna say some form of jealous lover motive. Definitely a homicide is the most likely scenario here.
I'm so torn. I feel like I could see it. The interesting thing to me is if you have a connection, like let's just say it is a related to a woman he was seeing, I would think that there would be some sort of connection that you could make from that. And it is interesting that nothing has, like...
That's fair.
I don't know. It's interesting to me. But that's like with the assumption that law enforcement is investigating properly and thoroughly.
Right, and is infallible, which none of that we
don't know.
Guarantee.
Yeah,
right.
That's the thing. So
that's a good point.
I really don't know. This is such a crazy case.
This is an odd set of facts.
And so where does this leave us? 16 years later, Hugues' case remains undetermined, and there are no suspects. And let us know what your theories are on our Facebook, and check out the pictures for this case. And of course, Winston on our Facebook, Insta, and our website. Hugues' father has stated, "We have nothing else in life except to find out who and how and why. That's the only thing that carries us forward." If you have any information about the suspicious death of Hugues de la Plaza, please call the San Francisco Police Department's anonymous tip line at 415-575-4444.
So how do you think Winston did today?
He did so well.
I know, he was a good boy. I was very proud of him.
Well, we took him for a long walk before this. I'm sure that helped.
Wear him out a little.
He is definitely the most rambunctious of our squad of dogs.
Yes, he is. He's a funny little boy. All right, guys, and please go ahead and drop us a 5-star review wherever you listen. Leave us some feedback. Tell us what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to hear more of, and of course, make sure to go check out the dogs on Facebook and Insta and the website and all that. And we'll be back soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.